So today we're going to focus on creation stewardship. And I wanted to point out that this is one of Kevin's great pictures that he gets from AI. So thank you, Kevin, for that. What I wanted to do was this. Because we are going to talk about climate change as it's involved in creation stewardship, because we need to know what's going on. And this is another one of those AI pictures. So we'll get to both of those things. So there are climate change predictions that have come about, and we need to be aware of those. But these are interesting ones with AOC and Al Gore. The world will end in 12 years due to climate change. Al Gore, I've been saying that for the last 30 years. And then his prophecy, 2009, climate change will melt all ice by 2013. Well, in 2013, it's still there. By 2016. By 2016, it's still there. By 2019. It's just representative of what's happening with a lot of the climate change alarmists. They keep bringing it up, and we need to know what is actually going on, because it's not a settled science. More predictions, picking on Al Gore. I predict the ice caps will melt by 2014. Next year, 2015, NASA report says, well, there's more ice than ever. It's growing back. And that's part of the cycling of our world, of our really our solar system. There are a lot of different factors that we need to realize are involved. Well, there were others who had something to say about Al Gore's predictions. The polar bears. When Al Gore was born, there were 7,000 of us. Today, only 30,000 remain, because there were the alarmists who were saying the polar bears are dying off, their habitat is being melted, and they won't have a place to live. They'll die off. But they're healthy and they're growing in population. Anyway, as far as my outline, two main things. This lesson will present creation stewardship, which will address the biblical concept of caring for creation and the scriptural response to the topic of climate change, including a scientific counter-argument to the most frequently cited environmentalist narrative. We need to know both sides. We need to know what our responsibilities are, but not to be alarmed by the alarmists who want to push us into realms where the science is very tenuous at best. This lesson will also discuss the impact of the curse on all of creation, looking at Romans 8:20-22, and the ways God expects us to fill and subdue the earth until Christ returns. So we want to encapsulate our viewpoints and our arguments and our understanding within the realm of Scripture. Okay? So let's first look at the biblical concept of caring for creation. Three main things. God is the reason that all things exist. We need to remember that. So Hebrews 11:3, by faith we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. We don't understand a lot of creation because it's above our pay grade. It's above our understanding. Secondly, God made the earth for mankind. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Genesis 1:31. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. We are special in his creation. We are specifically made in his image, in all that that means. And yes, we have a lot of variety in our world, a lot of things to explore. But we need to remember that God loves us and created us for a purpose. God gave man dominion over the earth to take care of it. And this is the creation stewardship role. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." That's our responsibility. And what does it mean to subdue the earth and have dominion over it? Not to destroy it, but to take care of it. And that's one thing we want to emphasize. So, as stewards of God's creation, we are charged with properly managing God's creation. And in order to do that, we need to understand what the real dangers are today that are being brought up. Are the alarmists correct? What do we need to take from what they are saying? How do we balance all the arguments that are put forth? I think that's a good word, balance. We need to be balanced. Now, a couple of arguments that are brought up from the environmentalists. So their perspective right here. They're saying the use of fossil fuels increases the concentrations of greenhouse gases like CO2, carbon dioxide. This prevents heat from escaping the atmosphere and causes the temperature of the earth to increase, with the danger of habitat destruction, catastrophic flooding, and destructive droughts. Now, I hope that we don't see waves like that anytime soon in New York. But it does bring the alarmist concerns front and center. So the rise of carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is a very important gas. We exhale carbon dioxide. The atmosphere has about 21% oxygen. We need to have at least about 16% to feel like we have adequate oxygen around us. But there's much less, maybe 0.04% of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But it does tend to bring about some warming because it forms a canopy up in the upper atmosphere which will hold in heat to an extent. How much of that? That's debatable. Okay? So they have that idea. Will it create these destructive habitat or destructive forces? And because of this, because of their views, therefore governments will need to take control of the situation because government knows best, right? Well, what's the opposite or what's the counter to that? Creation care perspective would be different. We would say if the earth was designed with man in mind, then the world should be able to buffer the changes in the amount of carbon dioxide as well as other problematic factors. Now, what am I saying there? God created the world. He created it so intrinsically beautiful. And for all these centuries, different catastrophes have occurred. The world is under a curse. It is groaning in so many ways. We have a lot of catastrophes, a lot of catastrophic events happening with earthquakes and hurricanes, and we know that. But God has created a world that can sustain itself until He is ready to take us off of this world and recreate it, and we will have a new heaven, a new earth, and we will be there, and then we won't have to worry about all these different things. For example, God designed certain plants to grow better with CO2 increases, and this increases the health of ecosystems and agricultural productivity. Plants use carbon dioxide. Isn't that interesting? We breathe it out because what we do, we take in oxygen, we form it with other things to make, energy is one of the things that we need. That we use the oxygen from to form our proteins and so on. And then we exhale the carbon dioxide. But the carbon dioxide is picked up by the plants. They will use it in... Something happened? Okay. The plants will use it in order to bring up the water from the roots. And with the sunlight's energy, the carbon dioxide will combine with the water, and voila, you get carbohydrates. You get food. And plants can produce food for us by using that carbon dioxide. So we'll come back to that in a bit. God owns the earth and calls on man to steward the creation for God's glory. It's for His glory. And we are stewards of that. So we want to balance things. We want to do our part because He wants us to do our part. Another argument is overpopulation. The environmentalist perspective is this. The population has almost tripled since 1950. 2.6 billion to over 7 billion today. They say overpopulation has caused many environmental problems, such as the destruction of habitats, pollution, increased crime, and increased poverty, and the list goes on. Now, others are reminding us that families aren't wanting to have as many children. And a lot of couples don't want to have children, which is why there's this argument that we need more immigrants to fill the jobs because we don't have enough in our population. And there are those who are saying the population has been increasing, but it's going to go down. And then we're going to have a lot of empty slots to fill that we can't fill. Interesting dilemma. But environmentalists are pushing government programs to limit family size and promote abortions. That is part of the abortion agenda, to reduce the number of children to take care of. So in America, we've reduced our population by at least 60-some million in the last 50 years. The counter-argument, creation care perspective. If man is the crown of God's creation and we bear the image of God, then the size of the population is not the problem, but rather our pride, greed, and the mismanagement of resources has led to the present situation. I remember reading one account years back when there was a real alarm about the population explosion. And this one scientist and theologian was saying that the earth could easily support 80 billion people properly assigned to different parts of the world, where, like Israel has recreated these great agricultural areas out of the desert. We can do the same thing, even of the Sahara Desert. It's just putting our minds to it. So, anyway, we could handle a lot more people, these people say, these particular scientists say, if we do it right. But, underlying all this, we were created to represent God, the owner, and steward His creation for His glory, as well as care for the poor and the needy. So we need to keep that balance. We are stewards. We need to be reaching out to those that are not in as good a shape as we might be. But we have these prickly things that keep on disturbing our ability to do what we should be doing, like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I said in the past in reference to this is that diversity is blatantly prejudiced. It's not diverse. The equity is hypocritically unequal, and the demand for inclusion seeks to exclude anyone who will not accept the DEI agenda. And we have seen many examples of these three processes at work. And it's a positive that a number of the DEI programs and program managers are being done away with, even in schools and in governments and in the business world, because they're finding that it doesn't work. It polarizes. Same thing with ESG. It's pushed by BlackRock, the largest investment company. They're still pushing it. Many investment companies have tried to do that, businesses, but they're finding that it is destructive to their goals. And so we need to realize that. And the Green New Deal is not producing much. I think we still have just the 6 pumps, the electrical stations that were being made by our Department of Transportation. Millions of dollars put aside for that, and they have 6 pumps that were put together. Other companies have been putting them out, of course. Okay, the Green New Deal. The goal of the Green New Deal is to have America running entirely on renewable energy by 2030. Folks, that's 6 years from now. Do you have your EV automobile ready for that? At present, less than 10% of the energy produced is through renewables, 90% from fossil fuels still. Fossil fuels, hydropower, and nuclear energy. So less than 10% would be with all the solar panels and all those farms of those windmills. Now, I will say that with the electricity that went out because of the hurricane, our neighbor down the street who does have solar panels and has an EV car, even though the solar panels didn't work to retain energy when the electricity went out because he didn't have a battery for it, he did have his car, which had a battery, so he was able to run his lights and his refrigerator off of his car for a few days. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, it is projected that renewable energy would only represent about 1/3 of American energy by 2050. So what do we do with the other 2/3, even at that? And what do we do with all those windmills everywhere we go? No birds are left, I guess. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the Green New Deal proposed by AOC would cost $93 trillion or $600,000 per household. Do you have $600,000 in savings that you could hand over? The Great Reset uses climate change as a means to force America to accept the inevitability of the Green New Deal. Another one of those force-fed deals. Let's just look at the myth of climate change. Is it a myth? What's going on? This particular point is from NASA. NASA is really at the forefront of pushing this whole agenda. It's amazing. They're pro-CC, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, climate change, pro-climate change. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere warms the planet, causing climate change. Human activities have raised the atmosphere's carbon dioxide content by 50% in less than 200 years. That's according to NASA's data. You should go to their site. I do have the link down there, and it's filled with this type of information. And they have figures that they can point to. From 1800, the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or whatever atmosphere they checked, at 282 parts per million. In 2022, about 200 years later, it's up to 416 parts per million, so 32%. Okay, the myth, though, is this. In any case, and irrespective of these uncertainties, all estimates of carbon dioxide levels during the recent past are very low by the standards of earlier geological history. And this is one thing you can bring up. Look to the past. There are a number of times where the carbon dioxide content was much higher and people survived very well. Because as I said before, plants love carbon dioxide, which means that more carbon dioxide, they grow bigger, they produce more fruit, and the like. It is therefore crystal clear that there is nothing inherently unusual nor necessarily dangerous about the extra carbon dioxide that is currently being contributed to the atmosphere by human activity, which anyway amounts annually to only about 3% of the natural flux. Most of the carbon dioxide that we have in the atmosphere is by natural operations of the world, of the air, of the sun's solar energy, and the exchange of gases. Together with oxygen, carbon dioxide is a staff of life for Earth's biosphere because the metabolism of plants depends upon its absorption. Increasing carbon dioxide in the range of about 200 to 1,000 parts per million, what do we have in some places? 416. Has repeatedly been shown to be beneficial for plant growth and to increase plants' efficiency of water use. So it's good for plants, which is good for us. And I like this cartoon because the scientist is trying to figure out all the ways that he can deal with global climate change. And the little guy down there says, plant more trees. That'll take care of it. Good idea there. And then you have people like Václav Klaus of the Czech Republic, former president there, who I believe is a Christian. I like his perspective. He's really helped the Czech Republic in many ways. As someone who lived under communism, and this is Klaus speaking, for most of my life, I feel obliged to say that the biggest threat to freedom, democracy, the market economy, and prosperity at the beginning of the 21st century is not communism or its various softer variants. It's an interesting comment. Communism has been replaced by the threat of ambitious environmentalism. The environmentalists consider their ideas and arguments to be an undisputable truth and use sophisticated methods of media manipulation and PR campaigns to exert pressure on policymakers to achieve their goals. Their argumentation is based on the spreading of fear and panic by declaring the future of the world to be under serious threat. And this is what we hear all the time from their side. In such an atmosphere, they continue pushing policymakers to adopt illiberal measures, impose arbitrary limits, regulations, prohibitions, and restrictions on everyday human activities, and make people subject to omnipotent bureaucratic decision-making. I love the wisdom of this guy. But listen to what he's saying, because our government is going in the direction of Marxism. We've talked about that in many ways. Man-made climate, he says, man-made climate change has become one of the most dangerous arguments aimed at distorting human efforts and public policies in the whole world. Our government is using these policies, these arguments, this alarmist environmentalism to bring control. Here's a good book, The Real Global Warming Disaster by Christopher Booker. This is what it says about this book. The book exposes the myth that the global warming theory is supported by a consensus of the world's top climate scientists. It shows how the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is run by a small group of global warming zealots who have repeatedly rigged evidence to support their theory. But the politicians, pushed by the media, have so fallen for its propaganda that, short of dramatic change, our Western world now faces an unprecedented disaster. And others have said it's not the scientists who are problematic, it's the policymakers. The ones who really don't understand the science, they will take what they want and run with it because they have an agenda. And that is what we need to understand. Climate change manipulation. Is climate change being used to force companies and governments to bow down to the Great Reset agenda? We talked about that in the past. A better question, how is climate change being used to force companies and the governments to bow down to the Great Reset agenda? Well, they come up with these charts. So here's a chart from 1000 AD to 2022. Okay, so over 1,000 years. And they show, oh, it's been going down, and then the Industrial Revolution happened, and all this carbon dioxide and other things are put into the atmosphere, and wow, the temperature's going up, and it's going to become destructive because we won't be able to live with all these atmospheric gases that are going to be poisonous, like carbon dioxide. Wait a minute. Yeah, we don't want to be in a pure carbon dioxide atmosphere for us. That's not too healthy. But plants love it, and as long as it stays within a certain strata of percentage, it's great. And it can even go up higher. Well, what they don't do is that they don't put it into perspective. So here's one that goes a couple thousand years back, and you see those green lines, and they talk about certain periods. For example, after in the 1500s, there was a little ice age. It was colder, especially in the northern hemisphere. And then you see it rising up in the last 50 years. But before that, around 800 AD, there was a medieval warm period. And that's where you had England being able to grow a lot of things that it can't grow anymore because it's too cold. The climate's not fit for it. Greenland used to be green. Now it's basically white. Iceland is less white than Greenland. But that's why the Vikings went to Greenland, because it was a great place to live, great place to farm. And those farms aren't there anymore. They're covered by ice. Sometimes it's 5 feet per year on the growth of that ice. The Roman warm period, it allowed Rome to really expand because it was so amenable to growing things and planting different cities and civilizations at that time. And then you had, before that, 1500 BC, the Minoan warm period, where again, it was a great environment for a lot of growth, a lot of civilization changes. So that carbon dioxide level was higher. The temperatures were higher, and life was good. Here's another way of looking at it, and I know it's complicated, but you see it, the orange being warm, and even warmer than it is today in a number of those times in the past. And then you had the cold times. And notice that it kind of changes off because it goes up and down, because you have a lot of factors in the atmosphere. One of those factors is the presence of a lot of volcanoes. When you have a lot of volcanoes that explode and put out all the ash and all the other gases, you have changes. Krakatoa, when it exploded and it was heard around the world because of the explosion, 2 times. The last one was in about 550. No, let's see. Yeah. Krakatoa. Anyway, when it did, the temperature of the world went down because the dust and the debris just kind of formed a shield, and the sun's rays were reflected off of that to a great degree. So there is change. It goes up and down. So we as Christians can say, yes, there is change. How bad is it? So I want to look at Calvin Biesner, a great book that he wrote with others, Climate and Energy. I had the privilege of meeting Cal at a conference down in Texas, and he was talking about his climate ideas. But he says in the book, there is no convincing scientific evidence that human release of carbon dioxide, methane, or other greenhouse gases is causing or will, in the foreseeable future, cause catastrophic heating of the Earth's atmosphere and disruption of the Earth's climate. He goes on to say this: moreover, there is substantial scientific evidence that increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide produce many beneficial effects upon the natural plant and animal environments of the Earth. So he's just justifying what we have been talking about. And then he says this: this book will provide solid scientific engineering and economic reasons to think that human-induced climate change, while real, he admits that, is extremely unlikely to become catastrophic, and that adaptation rather than mitigation, trying to control global temperature, will have better results for humanity and the rest of life on Earth. In other words, use the processes, find out ways that you can ameliorate some dangers, but also put into effect some practices that will help us get better. And then in the book, David Legates also has a chapter, and this is what he says. He explains, climate change is now a well-funded and orchestrated eco-socialist campaign to transform global society through wealth redistribution. That is one of the goals of this whole system of the eco-socialists, to redistribute wealth. Climate summits have become economic summits, and environmental policy has become social engineering, as evidenced by initiatives from the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. Talked about that last year. True scientific inquiry has been relegated to obscurity. We are being used by these big Great Reset organizations to bring about their agenda, because they want to actually rule the world. They want the elitists to rule the world. So even the whole sense of the racial polarity that we have, the racialism, racism, is to give them opportunity to come in and gain more control. They're using that. Well, what does scientific inquiry have to do with the misunderstandings of the creation mandate? Not as much as you would think, because it's not so much the scientists who are making these policies. It's the policymakers who have an agenda. When I taught biology, I really enjoyed dealing with the scientific method. And it goes from inductive thinking, what is happening, where you start with a question. What causes this? Why did this happen? Is there a God? And then you collect the data and you come up with a hypothesis. I think that God exists, and here's why. Now I've got to give some evidence. That's the second part. That's the deductive part, which is the if and then. And you do the experimentation, the testing of evidence, the putting forth of data, and testing its validity until you get to a theory. But a theory is still a hypothesis. You've got to test it. It's not a definitive understanding, because we have too many presuppositions, too many assumptions that we make. And I go on and I fill this out because these are two areas of reason. You have reason and faith. You go back to Aristotle and Plato. In Aristotle, remember, his fingers were pointing down, diversity. And Plato is pointing up, unity. That's all that philosophy is all through the ages. Is it diversity or is it unity? And what we have in God is diversity in unity in the Trinity. And that's why we need to go to Scripture in so many of these areas. But that has a lot more to it. There are examples of failed dominion by the New World Order. I talked in the past about Sri Lanka, which had a goal of achieving the fourfold outcome of a productive citizenry, a contented family, a disciplined and just society, and a prosperous nation. But then the president decided that Sri Lanka would become the world's first all-organic country. And that was 2021. So he banned the use of chemical fertilizers. And that was supposed to be a great experiment in green policy making. Well, the effects of the policy were devastating. The production of rice, which was their main crop, fell 20% in the first 6 months because the fertilizer couldn't be used. And they had to import $450 million worth of rice to make up the difference. They were exporters of rice before that. The price of rice went up 50% because of the scarcity. And then tea exports also plummeted. These failures also brought on a currency crisis, which led to a default of the country, a lowering of their economic status, and the country now faces hardship and greater poverty. Just a matter of years. In fact, this is where the people stormed into the president's palace. They didn't get arrested. The president escaped. He ran off with his life. So one commentator said this: "I cannot recall any time in the past when we had to struggle so much to get a decent harvest," a Sri Lankan farmer told Reuters in March. "Last year we got 60 bags from these 2 acres, but this time it was just 10. That policy ruined the country, and the president lost his job, almost his life. Second example, the Netherlands. The Netherlands is the world's second largest exporter of agricultural goods. Little country after the United States, but farming produces nitrogen oxide. Bad, bad, bad. Right, NO2. Or NO, I'm sorry. The government wants to cut nitrogen emissions up to 70% by 2030. Farmers who cannot meet their targets would be given 3 options: downside or switch from animal farming to crops, relocate, or quit. Just sell your farm. It was projected that 1 out of 3 farms may need to close due to the government policies, and agriculture makes up about 7% of the Dutch economy, and food is already at a shortage in the Netherlands. How will the reduction of farms in the Netherlands impact Europe and beyond? They produce so much food, and they're going to have to cut that back, sell their farms. Is the Great Reset setting the world up for failure? The real goals of the Great Reset, 3 of them: control through climate change, greater government control, worldwide socialism, one world government control. That's their agenda. We've looked at it from many different angles. The impact on the curse of creation. I'm almost done. What can we do about the impact of the curse of all creation? Romans 8. And the ways God expects us to fill and subdue the earth until Christ returns? Well, we have Romans 8. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself would be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. It also is suffering. So we need to balance things out. We need to be serious about our role as caretakers of God's creation. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion." We have dominion. We have a responsibility. We need to take that seriously. But we have Christians who are going the opposite direction. They've accepted this woke agenda. Alistair McGrath, a great theologian, I respect him, but he argued that believers who do not view climate change as an existential crisis possess less love for God's creation. Do we? I thought that was overboard. And this is a great book that deals with a lot of the scandals that are going on, the shepherds that are being wooed into this woke system. But this woman, Catherine Hayhoe, who's an atmospheric scientist and environmental activist, she likened Christians who are skeptical of man-made climate change to Pharisees and antebellum slavery defenders. Speaking of Christians who supported a fossil fuel-based economy, in letters to the editor, she said, quote, "You could literally take out slavery in these ideas of fossil fuel and replace it with take out slavery and replace it with fossil fuels." It was the same type of argument in her eyes, that it was just as bad as slavery. We need to get rid of it. Her entire presentation at the Southeastern Biblical Theological Seminary Conference centered on convincing theology and ministry students that global warming is a cataclysmic, man-made problem that faithful Christians must mobilize to solve. So you have Christians who are on that side. We need to listen to them, but we need to weigh it through all that's going on as well. We are living in a postmodern, post-Christian world that is dominated by a secular religion, which follows a different set of plausibility structures, background assumptions which are derived from ungodly worldviews. In order to break through this ungodly anarchy, we need to first understand what they believe. We also need to understand what we as Christians believe so that we can then defend what we believe and refute the error of the spirit of this world. So this is our key apologetic guide. Understand, defend, and refute. So be strong and courageous. have confidence in the gospel, and then look at the prevailing worldviews and how wrong they are. The prevailing worldviews did not and cannot offer real answers. Modernity says hope in man. That doesn't work. Postmodernity says abandon hope, and that doesn't work either. Humanity cannot live without hope. The Great Reset offers only an invented hope, a false hope, a counterfeit hope. And that's why we need to realize that Christianity has the answer.